Hi, thank you for coming down and meeting with me.
No problem.
I would like to use this time to talk about your observation. And before we get into the actual lesson, tell me a little bit about your students this year.
Okay, I currently am the regular ed teacher in an inclusion classroom, so I have 27 students. And within those 27 students, I have a variety of academic abilities. So the students work either in groups of same ability, or sometimes, depending on the lesson, they'll work together with varying abilities. So 27 students, inclusion classroom, and a bunch of different kids.
And what does the model look like for the special educator coming in and working with you during the ELA block?
Okay. We currently have 120 minutes of our ELA period, and within that time period, I have about 5 students on academic IEPs, and also I have 2 students on academic 504 plans. So those students see both myself and the special educator, and she will either come and push in to teach a lesson, or she'll do some pull-out depending on what the needs are.
So how does communication work and common planning for the two of you? Is it week by week depending on what skills you're doing, or do you run the same cycle during the school year?
We communicate daily. We do have common planning time to kind of tackle some more specific plans that we might need to address, but we communicate on a regular basis all day long. Within that planning time, we determine where the students are, what the data has shown us, what we need to do, what lessons we need to teach, if we need to reteach, or start a new skill.
And you mentioned data. How do you use data to inform your instruction? If you think back to what your data was showing you in September to what it is now, how has that kind of changed how you teach, what your rotations look like, your groupings? Can you talk a little bit about that?
In addition to some formal data that we get, whether it's DIBELS or grade scores, we definitely use that, especially in the beginning of the year, to kind of make grouping and see where the students fall and how they work with one another. In addition to that, we use weekly testing, phonics or spelling tests, so we use a lot of formal data to inform our instruction. But honestly, more so, we use more informal data, what we're seeing right in front of us, how the students are progressing and or not progressing, and whether that is, an understanding, showing us what they've learned through worksheets or with thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs middle, and a lot within participation within the small group. So the data we use, like I said, throughout the year, whether the formal data we use to guide our instruction and make groups, but we use a lot of the informal data as well.
Do you have any other supports that come in to help your class as far as grouping and understanding the data in ELA? Since we are a level 3 school, I know that sometimes the demands can be quite large during that 120-minute block that you have.
We have a reading coach within the building that is very involved with helping us manage groupings, looking at the data, helping us analyze it a little bit better, breaking it down and help us determine groups and instruction. So she's available to us. In addition to that, we have our principal and our assistant principal who helps guide us in those ways. We have common planning time, and then the planning time that we do within ourselves after school or on the weekends or in the mornings. So we spend a lot of time analyzing the data, making our grouping, and informing us instruction.
Good. Let's look at the lesson. How do you feel that the lesson went overall?
I felt that the lesson went well. The students that were in front of me were my students that most of them were on either IEPs or 504s. If they weren't, the data supported that they worked well with those group of students. So they would be, they had struggling readers, maybe struggling in phonics or fluency. So that was the group of students that I had in front of me. And knowing that, I know that they need a lot of cueing, repetition, modeling, and progression of level of difficulty within the lesson. So considering what my objectives were that they were initially able to identify cause and effect, match it, then determine it within a sentence, and then create their own. I felt that it went well. I know some students within the group struggled a little bit more than others, but that was also to be expected, and knowing that, tried to give those students maybe a little bit extra guidance and support. But I was pleased with the outcome.
I was pleased with the lesson too. I thought it went really well. When you first started the lesson off, you gave them the definition and had them repeat it so they knew what the focus was going to be of the lesson. I'm wondering if you had started with asking them what the definition was, would they be able to tell you at that point? Was it a secure skill you were looking for, or you were still working to get that skill secure?
So this was definitely not a secure skill at this
Okay.
point in time. This was the first time since the school year. Every week we have a different skill and strategy in reading comprehension, and this was the first week we had done cause and effect, which I know in general is a little bit more difficult.
Correct.
So they had just kind of started working on it. So maybe some of the students within the group might have been able to tell me, but I felt that I wanted to include the whole group, so that's why I started with saying it, having them repeat it. So my progression probably would be during the next meeting to ask them to be able to identify or define cause and effect.
And if I had stayed through the whole ELA block, would all the other groups have been started the same way, or did you modify that for that particular group?
That was modified for that group. Some of the other groups that I had would have actually went right into maybe starting with using the picture cards and writing the sentences right away. I already know that they were secure with matching. I already know that they were secure with finding it within a sentence. So other groups would have started out differently, probably with the progression to identifying cause and effect within a reading comprehension passage, where that's a little bit more challenging.
I felt that your transparency to the student sitting in front of you was very relaxing to them. You started off by telling them the definition, having them repeat it so they understood what was expected of them, and then the progression of the skills, you were very honest with them. Okay, now we're going to do the next step. It's going to get a little bit harder. And you did check-ins along the way. How do you feel about this? Is it okay, not okay? Do we need some work before you were just jumping ahead? So I found that you were using that as a good informal assessment for you. Do you use that often or just with that group?
No, I use that often with all groups. Lots of different informal assessments, whether it's them identifying their own ability to understand with maybe a thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. Now we know that's very subjective. They might say, oh, I got it, and then you notice that they don't, but it's a way for them to start to identify how they feel. Also, like I said, just the worksheets in front, I modeled the first few and then had them try a couple on their own, and then that kind of gave me a better idea. Are they still needing my support to help them, or are they able to take it on their own or work with a partner and do that? So informal instruction assessments are very important for my teaching and where I'm going to go with it. Some kids in that group I knew they had it, others I could identify still really needed my guidance.
Excellent. What do you feel like your strengths were within that lesson?
I feel like my strengths within that lesson were repeating. I know that they need a lot of repetitive, so whether it was repeating the directions or repeating the definitions. I also felt that a strength was progression of the lesson, not just sitting doing the matching. They had mastered that, time to move on. So progressing according to what they showed me. If they hadn't mastered it, we would have gone back or continued. So I felt that gauging their learning and then progressing them through appropriately was another strength that I had.
I agree, and I think another strength was your time management and your ability to read the students. So for you to know when to stop that pre-teaching skill and to move on to the next step to get them to use the skill a little bit more independently was a good read for the amount of time that you had the students in front of you. And that was important to make sure that the rigor stayed high enough